going to do an introduction that I hope is worthy of Bob's writings. But Bob Podgurski has been doing poetry for over 25 years. And this is just a quote from Diane Prima, not particularly about Bob, but it makes sense to me. The ultimate claustrophobia is the syllogism. The ultimate claustrophobia is it all adds up. Bob has had a lifelong pursuit examining Hermeticism, magic, alchemy, the Kabbalah, and Western esoteric studies. In one poem he writes, spheres of love react to that reaction. David Landry says, I've never been particular about reality. About Bob's book, Wandering on Course, Charles Stein says, magic cannot do without poetry, as poetry without magic dwindles to the sad reinforcement of consensual norms. That's a great quote. Podgurski, if any more should dance through me, I should burst at the seams. That's a great Podgurski line. Robert Duncan poem. Often I am permitted to return to a meadow, as if it were a given property of the mind, that certain bounds hold against chaos. That is a place of first permission, everlasting omen of what is. Robert Podgurski is a magus, and these poems cast spells. This is not a metaphor, it's a warning, says Peter Lamborn Wilson. A Podgurski quote. Then the reason our palms naturally face away, to grasp our fortunes we may not know, hopefully conceals them to make touch our sight. Born on June 6, 1961, Robert Podgurski.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks everybody for showing up today for the launch of Wandering on Course. Before I start, just going to mention, did you mention David Landry, a mutual friend of ours? I met David last year up at the Cloudburst Symposium in Naples, New York. And it's a small get-together of poets, and they do a really good job. It's really isolated in the Finger Lakes region. And Brian had told me, well, David told me about Brian's store, and I never would have known about this. Right. Had I not. I live in the Charlotte area where all we believe in is tearing down bookstores and putting up more banks. So this is a godsend. This is a breath of fresh air having this store up here. And initially David mentioned to me, we need to get a hold of Brian to help figure out a name for the store. Did he tell you that? No. And he blew me off. I had, you know, it was like Scuppernong. I was like, this is the South, muscadines, you know? Or I was thinking, Ross and I, my good friend, were thinking, how about Mad Dogs? And then it came to me, Night Train. Night Train. All aboard the Night Train. You could have a Charles Bukowski night in the alley, you know? BYOB, bring your own box of wine, your own box to live in, whatever. And I had to throw that in because otherwise I would not have known. And this book, the cover, much of what I've written about it has come about from being in North Carolina. Many of these poems span a good 20, 25 years. We're talking about a manuscript like this, gone down to that, because I never felt comfortable overall with it until I had found the direction that I wanted to take, the direction that seemed to be underlying the text. And so on the covers, there's a tree that I had seen up on the Mountain Seas Trail, the Art Lode Trail. If anybody's familiar or ever hiked it up in Pisgah. And it was right when a snowstorm hit last year, so I took this picture right when I was about to get stranded in the snow. And I've actually made a study, a photographic study, which I'm going to do some work with and put online, of exposed roots of fallen trees. I'm surprised nobody's ever done that. There's some just amazing things that you see in these trees that have been uprooted from windstorms and such. But this book, in a lot of ways, is about my exposed roots and exposing my roots. And before I start, I wanted to mention a little bit from Joe Napora, author of Sentences and Bills 1917. It's a wonderful book. It's about the workers of the world, the Wobblies, the unions, during right around World War I. Some excellent stuff in there. And thinking of Pete Seeger just passing away, Pete Seeger would have loved this book. But Joe is working on a manuscript which he asked me to look at some, and it's the Mound book, and it's about a walking tour of the Indian mounds in Ohio. And it's a wonderful book. I hope he finds a good outlet for it, because it needed to be done. And his book really is, it's really like the Patterson of the mounds. And in it, he's got this one brilliant line where he talks about poets do readings to convince themselves they are real, and they write poems to convince themselves that they will abide. And when I read that, I thought to myself, you know, I've got to think about why am I doing a reading? To sell books? Well, not really. I mean, it's nice to sell books. But as I thought about that, yes, it is to feel real, but it's also to activate the chant, to inform and extend the content of the book, because otherwise, what's the point? Why not just read it yourself? Or why not I just stand here and read off the page, and that's that? I don't think we get much from that in readings. But he goes on to say that neither is so, but both. Poetry resides in the middle, and I think that's a key statement, both living and dead, spoken and written, oral and visual. The middle is the expression of the body, the unseen body. Poetry exists at that point, in between what is observed and what is imagined. And I would like to add to that, to me, that the magic of poetry, it occurs in between the phanopia, the melopia, and the logopia, as Pound put it, in between the image-casting power of words, the hypnotic sound of language, and the ratiocinative loop, the circle, created by the logic and play of the meaning of the words. And so as Brian mentioned, poetry and magic is important to me. The incantation is a purposeful oral act, whether it's for personal development, affirmations, enlightenment. I think we all have a basic idea of what most people engage in within a magical act. And poetry is not necessarily of that, but it is of necessity. To me, poetry is a translation of the greater act, a transmission picked up from encountering things, interpreting them, feeling that chant, and then projecting it outward. Hence, both these books, this book of poetry and the Sacred Alignments and Dark Side of Sigils, are sort of brother books because they came out at the same time. The Sacred Alignments basically deals with the divine signature as it emerges through the reticulations of geomagnetism, the Earth's grid, implications of Renaissance-based Enochian angelic magic that John Dee and Sir Edward Kelly came up, and modern sigil magic, which for a very brief encapsulation is very much like the Eastern yantras and mandalas, mystical images that are used for purposes of elevating consciousness, etc. But to me, the interesting thing about poetry is that poetry need not be directed. Poetry should take on a life of its own, and it should capture and possess the person in charge of translating what they're seeing around them. And possibly more liberating, an act of freedom, which is, as we all know, quite a handful. Everybody wants freedom, but people really want to exercise it. And so, with that lengthy introduction, I'll launch into the book initially here with a few poems that deal with my walking about, because walking is important to me, hiking, encountering things as I go along here, and within the state, within my surroundings. And the first poem, let's see here, is, and I was originally going to read off of some other manuscripts and things left out of the book, but I think I'm going to just stick with the book. The first piece, Fall in Love with the Brave. This is sort of a bestiary, sort of a dark bestiary that starts in my backyard, and then it moves up here. I don't know how many of you have been over to Moore's Wall, over here by Winston-Salem. I think they call it Table Rock as well. Nice climbing area. I used to climb a lot back then. I don't so much now, but these are things I encountered on the way. Fall in love with the brave. Collapsed bluebird house, mournful instinct ensures the parents' non-return to the young dying as they must. Upsets me far more greatly than I could have guessed the home I erected fallen now their grave. At the escarpment summit, a snarling hellhound greeted and prevented our descent, strange, ironic, only to depart after its most vicious display. And the perfectly desiccated possum's corpse, fur, brown from decay, highlights white exposed ribs, opened cage, having long ago let loose its life, and the peregrine falcon chasing off the turkey buzzard, south, something about hell, I thought, and stars a conflict, or just a dance changing places. So I listened to the silent connections without a sound, absorbing as much as possible, point toward dark nested hopes, infinity, ever an expanding haven. Now, the bluebirds didn't die, so I did commit a falsehood. Actually, I was amazed at the bluebird house. I watched it fall open, the babies hit the ground. I was like, shit, I ran out, I grabbed them, stuffed them back in, hammered it up, and I thought, well, it's worth a shot. And Mom came back. I was sort of surprised. I didn't think she would. So there was a good ending to that story, but I guess I'm allowed to do that. What did Sidney say about, in his defense of poetry? Poets do not commit falsehoods because they don't make assertions. So that lets me off the hook. This next piece, Poems of Beechnut as a Food, I'm sort of working off of Lauren's I Really Like the Woods Within. Lauren understands the importance of beech trees, and beech trees are critical. Actually, I learned from a master arbor, if you're lucky enough to have beech trees on your property, that is a sign that you have excellent soil and growing conditions. They're really picky trees. I have a giant one in my backyard right now, and they seem to have followed me as I followed them. Where I grew up in Greensburg, Pennsylvania, right outside of town, there's Bushy Run Battlefield, where the Battle of Flour Bag Hill took place. And that's basically where Bouquet's troops beat off Pontiac's Indians that he had sent. They got word that he was on his way to Fort Pitt. They sent out sentries. They engaged in battle. And it was one of these minor skirmishes that actually echoed throughout frontier areas because it basically let the settlers know we can actually beat the Indians off. But I remember seeing beechnut trees there at a very early age, picking them up, the beech nuts, chewing on them, being sorely disappointed that they did not taste like beechnut gum. And I tried and tried again. I figured one day I'll get one that actually tastes like that. Didn't work. And this poem was actually first published by Stephen Ellis in his That Broadside series in Jordan. So the Jordanians actually got to look at this poem, which I would have liked to know what their reaction is, because I don't think there is a beechnut within 1,000 miles of anywhere in Jordan. Poems of beechnut as a food. Bands of softened solar glow cut silk swift, rustling and twisting through trees. The wind took on an appearance of a strange bird race, close to being reptilian in feel, but not looks. Wisps, the nephews of gusts, crept in between the boards of our study to form the long, slender lines and russet orange swirl that led to the eagle-like head, imparting only to me a sense that death had not come, even though it felt that way. That there is pain in the field where the brush reeds and hedgerows have been cropped, sheared down, yielding enmity and growing energy, where previously red-winged blackbirds could perch and run sentries, taking no further, cut off the haven and the potential to metaphor, for we cannot gather the plants, transformed to violence by the harvest. Technique, i.e. rendered usable. In other words, let the clearing come back and the rushes lay upon our mind for a fitting crown, the hat that is a hut, radiant compost heat. Beechnut, the eternal tri-knot pods, I remember picking up from the grounds of Bushy Run Battlefield in my youngest years, also Blevin's stepping stone into the court of the half-kings, Gaiasuta and Gaustrax. Resemble star any scent a much more subtle aromatic flavor. 4 wooden petals expand as they dry, blossom to expose 2 triform seeds, 6 and 4 lotus power, nut as meat. but as Green's Friar Bacon admonished, to let thee see how scholars used to feed, how meat refines our English wits. Yet magicians are the true chefs and ingredients of the convivium, of sense, the witty food cast from the tree, tough mind stuff, and tough mind stuffers together circle a cycle into intense golden orb, earth of water. Apple clear, ripening on the verge of autumn moonlight, eaves and wisps of dark, cold, salubrious air for biting into, clearing out the summer heat, and wind helps to round out the meditation on fire, beech nut symmetry. It is the sex of the symbol that drives us wild, snapping a sharp invagination on seed blades bouncing off rays, so the sight beams wild, building a bridge between oculus and intellectus, a fecund bed of the phantasm. The poet is the page, nature writes on, his back, a servant and courier of the ever-widening rift, where to plant it, as Joachim Tonkius felt, whether it be vegetable, mineral, or animal seed, the plot or womb is crucial, for it draws from the mummy of the ground, exudes, like produces like, the babe in the egg is a mummy, and its perfection can only be found in resurrection, birth, balsam no further. The turf I drum up with my feet kicks up a rhythm of mixed fruits, some acidic and sour, others mellowed sweet, like rotted apples give off a musk in the air of tannin scents. Fall temple. The poet cannot help but become the things written about. Harvest frozen in the dried form of the nut anchored in its static bloom, wired for security, for life, propagation, cured it can be dropped, will not break. And this next piece brings us back to when I met David Landry, because last year I gave a talk, which actually I have a sheet down below, a few sheets that have, if anybody's interested in hearing the talk, I did a piece on the accumulation in the poem as reservoir. And in that talk, I was thinking about the gestalt of poetics, how poets are supposed to pay attention to details, focus on this, that, enrich the poem. But then I realized over time there are certain things that we miss. Is that not part of the poem? But in the mind, as we go back over these things, then we accumulate accretions. The things that we do, for instance, today when you got out of the car and looked down at the ground, did you notice which way the shadow was being cast? Do you remember what was next to you on the sidewalk? Do you remember how the muscles felt in your legs as you moved? And then I realized as I thought about these things, those are the things that are the true, that gate is a gate of power. Awareness of the minutiae that expands the moment is really what the magic in the poem can be about. And amongst other things, besides poetry, just for everyday life and within the poem, I found it helps to remove writer's blocks from going over things like that. And so this next poem deals with that. And a very interesting thing I have to just mention, my father was a metallurgist for U.S. Steel, and he went to Carnegie Tech back when you did a PhD, you had to do spot welding, you had to cut glass, blow glass, and they actually learned how to do things. But there, in his school there was a forensic anthropologist who was specializing in dental work, and he looked at my dad's teeth and said, you know you have Mongolian in you. And I'm like, that's where the temper comes from. Now we know where that horrible damn temper comes from. And hence this poem, Muscle Memory, into submission or it will run a practical course en route to the quotidian register of dreadful banality. Reminiscences of the distant past, varying legacies inherited in limbs. My Slavic blood, immersed with the Mongol, has left a right arm of ancestral aggression high on the strike, prevalent, making it hard to harness, while telegraphing revolts are good. Life forces, ways into minds, every striation of conflict encountered, the overthrow pivots on a minor regime, mute-shouldered, talking in twitches, tendon quivers. The top line made a bow for taking low shots on characters. Parts of a weapon anatomical chapter of skirmish and battle, stored for reckoning volatile bursts of anger. Restraints of parts populate the warring body politic, and if they offend, start sharpening the axe, a quill. Emerging through the gene pool, dominant, kicking the recessive's ass, dropping some nucleic acid into obscurity, that mentality bred within the collective body, and the flesh ticks, twitches, are the signs that fight is brewing against gentle thoughts are unsuccessful in these stages, wherefore the soothing stroke, mistaken for an assault, goes not postal but into letters, drawn out of chaos, deeply kneading nerves and gently shifting soul into liberation's way to read motion on contact. Time to shift to part 2 of the book. This is sort of the Eros Thanatos part of the book. Or, to use the maybe often abused term nowadays, Tantra. But I go by the ancient definition of Tantra, basically just meaning the work of reality, the tanu meaning body, tan being to stretch. So if you look at reality as the weft, the fixed horizontal lines, the tantric is the one who shoots that thread in between and stretches that web of reality to do things with it. And to transition into those poems, I will go with a little untitled piece which actually stems straight out of an experience here in Greensboro. That was about 5 or 6 years ago. It was on the outer edge of town. Don't ask me where it was. It was after a very long day of bagpiping. I used to play bagpipes quite a bit. And so I stopped in this gas station, and it was a real doozy, boy. It was like boom boxes going, gang bangers, all this noise. I go into the restroom, and I'm seeing some wonderful graffiti. I love graffiti, and I love misreading graffiti, but I actually read this carefully, hence this piece. Above bathroom stall, blistered paint from a cigarette ember, etched inscription, "Kill me." I found some tantric wisdom. For a good time, call yourself a stranger. It then followed, for a binding time, call stranger yourself, or maybe just call yourself strange and be with it. Now, the next piece, this next poem goes out to a pen pal friend of mine in Glastonbury, Tana, who is sort of a devotee of Lilith. This piece is On the Lamb Mia. And it's always been a piece that's near and dear to me, but not for the fact of looking at Lil, the figure, or the Lamia, or the Christabel from Coleridge's work as being sort of like this dark figure. I think those that resist subservience are actually the ones that are moving into the light, and everybody who just has a real problem with that are the ones that are still maintaining some foothold in the Dark Ages. On the Lamia, do not assume Lilith's position discernible, times the many conceived equals not. Reigning above with sheer impunity over this mad race, posturing not for just anything, but penetration riding on every molecule thought, and open space is her wraith. Under the multitude of the sacred horrors, only a few shine as servants of the star, assuming her position, pounding the patriarchy, jigging, gigging, wriggling off its crank, rodent caught in her trap. He fights to twist and tear it off and be like her so that she may, like him, be unrestricted. Movement becomes the curvature, overture, spinal, tactic, next to the sensual arch in the back, next to the air that pleasurably envelops each line, is the mounting exchange, tantric voltage, stroking for sparks beyond all yugas, yogins. The living dead come on people that become their drive, simply ridden into walking away from their tombs. Rilke's Hectare knew full well their deceased clientele's souls fall with their flaccid will. Time for the rite of the shuddering, repulsion after ensnared in the glue of attraction, the big smile, most importantly, from having a talk with sex everyone appears to want to have, but taking a moment to listen to what she has to say without words. Sensation epidermal reveals the clothing, sheathes the urge, wrapped about object and desire, invasion and submission, all for fleeting ecstasy which turned on its head between legs and thinking there carefully before exposure can extend and maintain the glorious bliss side by side instead of. And this next poem is one of the few that I've done which is based from an inspiration from a painting. Gustave Doré's The Enigma. I don't know if anybody's familiar with it. I don't know if you have it in the book in the store around. It's a great painting. It's these two, it looks like these two sphinxes coming eye to eye, looking very amorous, but above this totally torn apart field of destruction, almost like a battlefield. It's one of these wonderful, and it's got one of the best titles too, because it is extremely enigmatic. And it makes, and I was inspired by it when I was working on my PhD, and I was a great distance from Barb, and we couldn't meet up too much. So this poem is based on that, a meditation on the enigma. This severe movement of separation and nascent choosing has placed us either side of the no man's plane on a live realm of Scaria, extends on ad infinitum. There is no rest when your bodies through your hands keep having sex, gushing caustic all over the irrational land palette for the mix of tantric artwork, ochre, dogs, plunge thumb down and you can feel it through your smooth holes, devastating. A volcano once raged through here. Now it's gone, and the magma of her grace flows still. Once it has hardened, what of the unborn and undead who never had a chance, or too much of one, and maybe got so far as to sprout? But the ravaged land bereft of fertile grace strangles the life out of them. Ranlands, less fortunate than fungus, for they can never spread, recede, devoid of succulence, cracks and fissures of the land's baked clay surface, yearn to ooze the fecund juices, but the lusting sun just fucks it dry. And so her body, potent in potentia, remains an edifice supine, permitting only a select few dwellers at the porthole, yearning to become someone's magical wish at orgasm, a chance. From a glorious conjunction on this plane of oppositions who've slaughtered each other during the precise moment of the conflict's cessation, we meet on our own terms, using our self-fashioned key to undo the enslavement of wedlock, remarrying every time we assume the body of beast and embrace, setting the field to flames, cleansing. When the incendiary passion becomes so great, resistance in turn becomes futile, and that very agonizing moment between reaching out and touching threatens the order of our entire universe. Then it's gone. Now let's see where we are time-wise. Okay. Anybody wearing out? Getting exhausted? Pete, just wave, throw something at me, because I don't have too much more to go. I know I've gone over the 20-minute threshold. Now, when we were at Cloudburst, it's like 20 minutes, stop, make it stop. So, but this is a book launch, and so I've assumed the throne of the state. Oh, by the way, where's my red M&Ms?
I hadn't heard about the red M&Ms.
Oh no, we went through this thing. I said I want the 3-quart fishbowl of red M&Ms, or forget it, all bets are off. And so we got into this little joke about it. It's funny, is anybody aware, you know, what was it, Van Halen? Does anybody know about the infamous rider? Oh, you do? Okay. Anybody else? Who was it? David Lee Roth. All brown M&Ms must be removed, or a complete forfeiture of all funds, etc. He had that written in. So, by the way, you need to look. Oh, that's right. So much for contract. I had to mention that. I wish that. Well, he's in absentia. You have to let him know. Let him know. Amanda. I swear, if somebody ever did that with me, you know what I'd do? I think I'd go grab about 3 bags of M&Ms, go to Home Depot and get a can of Krylon. You know, get them ready. It's not like they said they had to be edible. But the last section of this book I want to talk about just briefly. Section 3 here stems out of my work with the poetics that I had developed, the double one in poetics, and an extension of that, the exploration, the exposure from the unexplored. And this is sort of connected with that gestalt I was talking about earlier. It's all fine and dandy to think that we can use our perception to draw in everything and go back and relearn the field and gather in the elements, but then I realized there's always going to be something missing that's going to affect us, much like the example I give in the book I mentioned in the back. I get on my telescope, I look up at Orion's nebula. It's too far away, nobody can go there. We know something's going on, the stars are maybe light years away, maybe it's already, there's a reaction occurred and it affects us. But we don't necessarily articulate it, but we are affected by it. And so the poetics I was coming up with, I'm thinking, well, this is almost like a failed project. It's like, yeah, you're going to talk about things you can't talk about. Well, yes and no. I think there's a sense, we all have a sense that there is something going on around us that we can't necessarily articulate, but we can maybe express in some way. So that's what this is born out of. And so the last couple of poems I want to read, first of all, Rebel Departure, or it can be read Rebel Departure. And I wrote this poem back in 2008, right around election time, right around the time I get depressed every year because of what we've got for candidates. And so every time election comes around, it's one of my rituals is to read Melville's The Confidence Man and to go drink myself stupid. No. This time I actually tried to do something constructive. And so I came up with this poem, which is dealing with a revolution of speculations. I envision a magical revolution take place. I envision one of awareness of the land. And hence with this one, this piece deals with a little bit too, if people were to think about how the collapse of nature in the Renaissance, like the fall of Adam and Eve, there was an ongoing debate that nature fell with man when he fell. Now, no matter how you think about that, now sort of argue that nature isn't suffering some downfall from what we do. And so, Rebel Departure, the intentionally lost cause of the Thelemic Confederacy. Operation Southern Star has begun to dismantle the disunion and secede from fascism and state. The need for inducting Shivite priests is great, and to chronicle the cabinet of tantric fiasco controlled with bardic wailings. The narrative and beast will come out from their caves. Our officers must stand back and listen carefully to their cries, summons to fire only when they see the darkness of lies. Phase 2. Behead the state, usher in the warnless rule, under will-less law down so far, south to signal an essential independence signaling, deep ones to spread order of disorder, where the few who can see will listen up against the whole summons soulful food. Phase 1. The house is as not, a keep compound of the ill at ease, polity and duress, except in the minds of the rebel, swells, Helion, the fruition of the Kali Yuga, the black house is right here, not over yonder, with the loyal sons of the angst-orbited fate, watchers maintaining the threshold line, bisecting the light and dark worlds, the stars broadcast and stripes, a reminder of pain that is not always a liberator. Not structures. Swamps reclaim these old estates in decrepitude, the systemic lumbering goings-on where lurks the green goddess algae draped kelp crown and her bed of wormwood. Vermouth belies her undergrowth, studying the swimming potential spermatozoan flowing round, insurrection of the land, mirrored in the revolting souls, buried beneath the party line, drawn beneath pitched conflicts, throwaway troops, mulched over that must be forgotten in order to fulfill their purpose, summoned to the cause by shrieks, doetic rebel howls, housing Gehenna, made of the wood of unfulfilled desires, fed by the blood, letting Confederate priesthood, the old Southern giants, live oaks rise up out of the terrible ground, fed on the water of life, a nameless still, witness to the trouble that never left, ignored, erupts into other wars. Phase 0. The battle for the hill to stand upon and increase the field of visual rays standing out, fertile and profound, as ventured by the lonely farmer, descrying the crop's growth under the last rays of sunset, devil worship, aggression of all directions, without a single slave to pull, plow the coveted can run feral growths across the border. And without a boundary, we have a space to share. The air provides an infinite room, housing breath with bodies on the intake. Each image recalled on the mount, beasts of the home front are field foraging to bring more sustenance, fruit bearing, the lower body cleansed, stripped of thread-worn flesh of the whip, discarded so the gentle physique, left alone, will carry liberation to the ground, that theater of revealing, winning. With each runaway inspiration's train, liberation emerges from below, same as a bunch of green peanuts about to be boiled, speak of the main course. Their colors change under the careful watch, heat and salt. Downward focused crosshairs become sights, grave markers, optic grid coordinates. Do little to reveal the rarest honey made by the dying bees. Paradise lost to the victors, indiscernible, discredited, graceless. And for the penultimate piece, I want to read Mountain Scent. And this poem deals, this is the one that the cover's based on when I was up on the Mountain to Seas Trail. And I got stuck in a snowstorm, and I actually had to build a fire for a change. I could have probably gotten by without it, but it was still, it was good. It was actually an instance where I had to use some survival skills. And I'm always interested in aspects of survivalism, not because I'm getting ready for the apocalypse. None of that. It's just because it's a neat thing to know how to do. It actually lends to having to read objects in the natural world in a different fashion, because as poets and artists, I think we look at the natural, oh, that's beautiful, that's interesting. As a survivalist, it's like, oh shit, if I don't get that right, I'm going to die. And so it's quite a different thing. But maybe not, because I always think about William Carlos Williams, what he said, one doesn't write poems because one wants to, one does it because one has to. And so I thought maybe these two do come together. Maybe survival and creative work and poetry, they aren't so separate from one another. Hence, I came up with the term evolved in this poem of ecstatic providence. And so, Mountain Scent. The moment that is full of the earth is full. That's from Ken Irby's Variations 13. A perfect fire ignites out of ecstatic providence from the top down upon carefully layered kindling, logs for survival set, needs branches of the self-same passion, enables the able, supple limbs upon the trunk from the crown down, pathway blazing. The same applies to our bodies, caught in this illuminating descent, unveiled in the coupling opposites. The third arises, union, reaction, flames spreading downwards, dictated by the eye of the spark. So much light reflected off the fresh fallen snow, rare now, even up higher in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The storm of 16 February 13 caught everyone off guard. On the other side, at the courthouse falls, a peculiar absence of snow. Nonetheless, had the stream running high. At camp, the fire immolates inward, bestowed. 3 lone logs fan outward flames, a devil's pitchfork, the center time, hollowed out, a hummingbird silhouette fashioned so delicately, long and slender, a sickle bill, now pulsating out of the orange scarlet heart of ember glow, ebbing and waxing, this self-tending furnace, going for hours untouched, how the solitary survive by maintaining their grip and hedge bets, by banking their coals. Accordingly, the beloved has wings, given to volatile displays, caprice, and departure upon trains of indecipherable thought. At any given point on the ridgeline, the snowfall rate varied. The parkway bare on the border of shining rock, but back on the art lobe and mountains to sea trail, it was deepening. No view from the Devil's Courthouse. Whiteout conditions prevailed. The cloud ceiling so low as if the sky's bottom fell out above and below, coalescing in the dissolution of vision's field. All those giant mountain laurel and rhododendrons, thousands of buds, dormant violet hues encased, hidden passions under protection of the snow's wall of winter warmth. How long to hold out for the opening and return from the woods, with skills born bushwise and honed axe edge, ground sense freshly split humor, and nerve balls out bearing on magnetic north. Ultima Thule destiny coordinates along certain lines. Life, that fire-building sensibility creeps down. It's kinetic, traveling cell to cell from cognition to ignition, spread by the metabolic inferno, carrying swatches of wonderment in a survival sack for all ways take notice, never running, but living outside of time. And to move out of the woods, back to the source, and off into absolute space, I want to finish with this last piece of mine, Jimson's Gift. When I first wrote it, and it was published in Sulphur, when was this? It would have been 1987, issue number 23. But I had shared it with Garrett Lansing, who, if those of you who aren't familiar with his work, he is really the preeminent poet of modernist magical verse alive today. And his book, The Heavenly Tree Grows Downward, I strongly recommend it. And there's a new edition that's come out by Atlantic Books, so Richard Grosinger is still doing good books of poetry. But when I wrote this book, I was in Colorado working on my master's, and I'm out in the backyard, and Jimson plant popped up, and I was just amazed with flowers on it. And Garrett's like, well, by the way, Bob, did you know that Fitzhugh Lane, the New England painter, he was paralyzed since 18 months old, and they believe that he probably ate apple of Peru, as it was called, or Jimson. It's interesting because his paintings, if you look, it's very much in the Hudson Valley School of Painting. These realist landscapes, but there's something different about the coloring. There's something different about the texture in the water. One doesn't wonder if it might have come from that experience at an early age of being paralyzed by one of the most deadly hallucinogens on earth. No, Jimson weed is not to be recommended. It is extremely deadly. And it always reminds me how with a potato, you pick up a potato and those green shoots off of it. Don't ever make the mistake of eating anything green on a potato, especially even if you're not allergic. It can kill you really quick. Scuppernong and everything that's in there is something else. But so Jimson's Gift, and Garrett wrote a piece which actually inspired it in part, makes one of his most beautiful pieces. The great shape is without form. All life long the dew falls from heaven. All life long trees climb up from underground waters. In the seed of the old God, the new gods are swarming. The earth is ready for planting. The shut eye is opening the heat. Jimson's Gift, smelling the wet peatness of petunias astride the patio, sends my mind to a less arid land, one where lush vegetation thrives, chaotic, feral growth patterns whose origin one may only speculate on a concise, fertile plant fetus, babe enclosed in a seed cadence of ortum fecundum, expansion of roots, wild underbrush, gnarly brambles, goetically abrading the ground, the soft, enhanced by the nettled sting. Over in a barren corner, Datura, a lone thornapple, spreads its limbs and toothed fronds, alone purveying the alien unearthliness. Some things so much in contact with Tarum clue at a source beyond the black that nestles stars.